Nick, thank you so much for being here. This passage where you talked about post-traumatic growth.
Okay.
I feel like that's this red thread that ran through your life, but also ran through this book. I'd love for you to please read where I kind of put the brackets.
I was never quite sure why so much changed for the better in these years, until one day, at an event in Montana, I was sitting in a bus with Arthur Brooks, an expert on happiness and an Atlantic contributor. I asked him to tell me the number one predictor of happiness and satisfaction. There's one thing you can do, he said. What's that? Get cancer and survive it. He responded, unaware that I'd ever been sick. He pointed me to the research. Multiple studies have shown that survivors of cancer often experience what is known as post-traumatic growth. Standing on the edge of mortality gives them clarity about what matters. They now appreciate life more. They feel increasingly self-assured. They've confronted the fact that they don't have much time left, so they value it more.
What was the trauma that you were recovering from when you were on a bus with Arthur Brooks? And can you also share a little bit about the growth that followed that was happening around that journey?
Yeah, it's an interesting moment in my life that I learned a lot while writing the book and reflecting on it. So the book is putatively about running, right? But it's not a training guide. Your 5K time will maybe improve a little bit, but maybe not a lot once you've read the book. But it's a story largely about my father, who has this crazy cinematic life, and then a little bit about myself and my running. And what happened is I had run my first fast marathon at age 30, and then immediately afterwards had been diagnosed, like 2 days afterwards. The doctor had found a lump in my throat. And then, I went through this process. Some of you have probably been through it where, I'm young, I'm healthy, I eat all this kale, like how could this be? And then, maybe it's something bad. Okay, we'll have to do a surgery. They do a surgery. And they're like, well, actually, it's not cancerous. You're fine. And then they call back, sorry, we read the slides wrong. And so then I have to go through the treatments. I go through radiation. And if you're going to get cancer, it's really the kind you want. And eventually, maybe 6 months later, I'm through. But I can't walk around the block. I'm completely wiped out. And so I've gone from being this, very fast marathoner. And then part of the book is my thinking back through, later in my life I became much faster, thinking about the ways that experience had blocked me from getting faster in my 30s. But the question you ask about what it made about my life better, first mountain, second mountain, like my 20s, it was mostly downhill. I wasn't like climbing up a mountain. I wasn't crushing it. And what's been interesting about my career is that everything started to go well after I was 30. I don't know why, but I think that going through this was a big part, or started to go better. I think a big part of it was going through that experience.
One of the things you talk about in the book a lot is, and you signal it in the introduction, running would both bring me closer to my father and also help me avoid becoming him.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, one word. All right. My dad. Maybe the simplest way. People used to ask me, what do your parents do for a living? I would say, my mom is an art historian in Boston, and my father runs a male brothel in Bali. My dad is this extraordinary man who, comes out of Oklahoma and busts up through the American meritocracy and wins a Rhodes Scholarship. He's photographed in Life magazine, with a story called The College Student. John F. Kennedy said, this kid's going to be president before me. Comes back, marries into my mother's family, which is a prominent, Washington family. My grandfather at the time was the Undersecretary of Defense. So my father is like on track. And then life, I guess his first mountain is like Oxford, right? And then he wants to fulfill all this ambition, but he can't, because life is, when you're not inside of college or graduate school, life gets harder. And he drinks and he struggles, and then he has this realization that he's gay, which complicates his political ambitions. He leaves my mother, and he does some very admirable things. He is the first openly gay presidential appointee under Ronald Reagan, and some less admirable things. He sets up something more or less like a brothel in Bali and becomes a crazy sex addict who loses all his money, and I end up financially supporting through his last years in life. And so what that sentence means, two things. So when I turned 40, my dad put a note on my Facebook page, my very public Facebook page. Like, I'm a media figure. There are lots of people who follow this Facebook page. My dad's note is like, hey, Nick, happy birthday. So proud of you. Life's going well. Beautiful kids. Your wife's awesome. But you should know that every man's life falls apart at 40. You know, the temptations of this age are too hard. It's too hard to hold it together. You know, it certainly happened to me, happened to my father. And God, I hope it doesn't happen to you. And so in a way, like, the running away from him is I wanted to not be like. I adored him, and I spent much of my life trying to be like him. He's an amazing man, but I also wanted to not be like him, and I didn't want my discipline to slip, and I didn't want, not that I'm in like real danger of becoming a Southeast Asian sex addict, but like there are things in his life that I resist. So that's the running away from. The running towards him is, you know, a lot of the book is about this later period in life where I became, you know, went from being a good runner to set an American record, was top ranked in the world, like became much better. And it was after his death. And I think what had happened is I started to train harder, in part because it was a way of mourning him. We'd always run together. He had taught me to run. And so I was running to be closer to him, but also as a way of maintaining discipline to be further from him.
Your relationship with running in this book is, it's like the liver. You know, the liver is the most important organ for metabolizing.
Yeah.
And it feels like...
Put that on the back. Running is like the liver of this book.
It's like the liver of your life.
Yeah. Well, that would have been a good title, not the running ground, the liver of your life.
There you go.
Anyway, keep going.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
But I also imagine that writing is a huge part of your life.
Yeah.
How did writing this book change your understanding of yourself and your experience?
Well, it's a process both of writing and reporting, right? So, like that conversation with Arthur, which I had never heard of the concept of post-traumatic growth. I had never thought about what it had meant in my life. So you write a book about your life and you reconsider all of these episodes and you think more about what your father meant and you think more about like what becoming a parent meant. The thing that the book, probably the thing that changed the most was my appreciation of my father. And in the process of the book, I read his old diaries. I read things that he'd written to me, and I just saw a deeper, more complicated, more tortured. I'd always thought of him as like the most intelligent person I'd ever met, but an even more intelligent person. Like, there's a letter, the moment that like just knocked me to the floor is I was going through old letters. The book was mostly done. And I found a letter that he wrote to me when I was 21 years old. And it just foresaw all the difficulties I would have in my 20s, the things I was good at, the things I was bad at. It was as though he'd like parachuted 20 years into the future and written about my life. And for a father who was not really there that much, I saw him a couple weeks a year, right? Like he wasn't there with me every day. Just extraordinary. And to have someone who watches, observes, and cares about you so much to be able to write a letter like that is a gift. People ask me, like, how did I forgive my father? And the simple answer is, like, it is very rare in life. And like, my father, like, blackmails me, says he's going to kill himself if I won't pay off his prostitution debts while he's in Singapore. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's not great. And yet the book is fairly sympathetic to him. And the answer is, look, the guy... It is very rare in life to have somebody who just truly loves you absolutely and always wants the best for you no matter what. And like you'll forgive a lot for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have peace with it that you didn't have before?
I think so. Yeah, I feel like I have like less peace with my sisters who feel like I was maybe too sympathetic to him. More peace with myself.
You write a book about them, it'll sort it out.
Oh, they love that. I mean, they love the book. They edited the book. They love me, but they're like, they think that he wasn't quite as sympathetic as character as I portrayed him.
There's this arc of your life that comes across in the book, which is that the early stage of your life is you are extrinsically motivated to achieve certain outcomes, and then it seems like as your running life moves forward, you slowly start to your relationship with running isn't so much, I'm going to beat my time, I'm going to set this record, I'm going to do it. It's more intrinsic. Like, yeah. I love this. It heals me, it feeds me, it sustains me. And ironically, your performance in running gets better.
Yeah.
The more intrinsic your motivation becomes.
Yeah, it's true.
And on page 185, you say, this is when you start setting records. You said, we all contain different versions of ourselves buried deep inside. This faster Nick had always been there, perhaps for 25 years. To find him, I needed distance from the cancer, and I needed Finley's your coach, Finley's plans. I wondered then, as I wonder now, what other versions of me exist that there may no longer be time to find?
Yeah.
That like winning is becoming the truest version of yourself is this like beautiful, like very second mountain red thread that runs through the whole book.
Yeah.
Am I reading that correctly? And
I think you are reading it correctly. I mean, I haven't reached such a state of spiritual transcendency and maturity that I'm above trying to set records, like.
Sure.
Still out there. I was out there in Prospect Park trying. I was trying to run the fastest anybody had run across the Manhattan Bridge this very morning, right? In Strava, and then I checked the app, and it was the 6th fastest, and I was a little bit bummed, and that's not very mature, but it is what it is.
I'm disappointed.
Yeah, some fast people out there, man. But there's no question that in order to get fast at running, a couple of psychological things had to happen. So part of what had happened is I had run a 2:43 marathon right before I got diagnosed with cancer. And then the weird thing is that in my 30s, I just sort of ran the same time over and over again, right? Like 2:43, 2:43, 2:42, 2:42, like weird. And then in my mid-40s, when I should be getting much worse, I run a 2:29, which is, it doesn't sound that much faster, but for anybody who's a marathoner, it's a whole different world.
That sounds fast to me.
Right? It's like, that's like genuinely fast. And part of the moment where I decided to write the book was when I realized, oh wait, the reason I hadn't been able to go faster than 2:43 in my 30s, when I was training hard and when I was fitter, is that I hadn't been able to conceive that I could be faster than I'd been before I got sick. Right? And so I had to kind of like break through that psychological barrier. And there's another interesting moment in the book that probably like the thing that I had been very fast in high school, and then I'd gone to Stanford, which has a very, very good athletic program, as people may know. And I had run with the team for a year, and then I'd quit. And I had assumed then that I quit because I wasn't good enough, right? These kids are all faster. They ran faster in high school. And then like now I know, like, obviously I had this talent that I didn't see. Like, why didn't I see it? And the reason I hadn't seen it is because I wasn't able to conceive of running as like something that gave me spiritual meaning. I hadn't thought of it as something that can be beautiful in life. I hadn't thought of it as a moment to reflect. And because of that, I'd only thought about it as something where you win or you lose. Mm-hmm. When I was losing, I stopped. And the weird thing is that actually if I had kept going, I would have probably ended up winning a little bit. And that was a strange realization to make, that sometimes you have to kind of let go your obsession with success in order to ultimately find the success.
Beautiful. Before I hand it over for questions, and do this within the allotted time, which makes me extremely proud.
That's great.
So I did some homework, Nick.
Yeah.
I've spoken to people who have worked with you.
Okay. Good.
Everyone was like, Nick Thompson is the boss you want to work for. He's the editor you want to work for. He's an inspiration. He will bring you to be the best version of yourself and kind of impart some of that intrinsic motivation that you found. What it got me to think about is, I think there is a moment we're in right now where, I'm not going to get political, but there is this paradigm of power which is toxic.
Yeah.
To put an alternative paradigm of power into the world, that you can motivate people, that you can accomplish greatness, and you can do it through post-traumatic growth, and you can do it as a beacon of motivation for the people who work with you. I feel like that alternative is needed now in a way that is glaring and deeply absent. And I think this book puts that paradigm forward. And also, the more I kind of checked your references, the more I'm like, holy shit, he is the guy. Like, don't meet your heroes. But
that's nice.
So thank you for doing that. Thank you for bringing that out. And thank you for offering an alternative paradigm of what success looks like.
Wow.
At a moment we need it more.
That's not even a question. That's great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Not sure who you called, but I appreciate what they said.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an interesting thing about being an editor. And so I spent most of my life as an editor at Wired and at The New Yorker, where your job is very much to identify what is the best version of the person you're working with, what is the best story they can tell, and can you get them there? And the biggest mistake people make as an editor is they try to get their version of the story in, right? And they want it to sound like the way they would write it, right? And they want it to be structured the way they would do it. And it just doesn't, you don't get the best work. You have to like, okay, so this person really likes to report in this way and they like to tell these stories. Well, let me help them do that, right? And like that's the skill that if you can do it, it works really well and you get great work out of people. And so learning that as an editor, where it's very kind of narrow and constrained, then you try to apply that to the other jobs I've had since then, and I've tried to follow the same thing.
I think you wrote something on LinkedIn, maybe or you said it somewhere, that that a good story needs to have cinematography to it.
Yeah.
Am I correct on that
correct.
rule?
It was not a rule, right? But
or a guiding principle.
Yeah, a guiding principle that if you can visualize something in your head, right? And if you can, like, a good test, right? So if you're trying to figure out whether a story will work for The New Yorker, The Atlantic, or Wired, and you describe it to someone, if they can see a little movie in their head while they're telling it, then that's a good story, right? And if they can't, then it's not as good a story. And so even if it's not going to be made into a movie for Hollywood, like as long as you can, and so when I'm writing the book, I'm trying very hard to, like, some of it is just analytical, but like trying to get scenes and trying to give people texture and like trying to get people feeling and trying to get them to see the characters. And I hope when someone's reading the book that they can visualize a lot of it. The whole first chapter, the first chapter was the most interesting decision I had to make while I was writing the book is what the first chapter would be. And because the book is mostly chronological, right? And it has to be chronological because the structure is so complicated. I'm telling my story, my father's story, and the stories of these other runners. And so you need to have, like, you need the core to be simple in order for like the spines to be complicated. And because if the core is complicated and the spines are complicated, the reader will be lost. But if you have a book that's chronological and you start it with my life when I'm a child, no one cares. Like, because no one cares that you have to, for someone to read about someone's childhood, you have to care about the person. And so, all right, so then you have to I need the reader to care about me before they get to my childhood or my father's childhood. And I also need them to understand that this is a book about running. It's not just a book about other stuff. And so what I chose to do is I gave a full mental recounting, at least as best as I could remember it, of everything that happened in my head during the 2007 New York Marathon, with like what I saw, what I felt, what I heard. I went back to diaries and letters and emails and all that. And so the book begins with this recounting of that one particular race, which was highly emotional because it was when I came back from cancer. And then it goes more into the chronological structure.
We have 10 minutes for questions.
Great.
I am fired up.
I'm curious if running has made you a better father, and in what ways?
In some ways, no, because there are times when I'm running, right, when I could be with my 3 boys, right? And, you know, every weekend there's some moment, right? And I try to minimize it as much as possible, right? So this morning I ran to work, right? I took the little guy to school. He's now 12. I dropped him off, and then I ran, right? There's no missed time, right? And on the weekends, I'll run at 5 in the morning before they wake up, or I'll take them to their soccer game. I'll bring them to the warm-up. I'll run during the warm-up, and then I'll stand on the sidelines. So I try to minimize the amount of time away from the children. But if my wife were here, she would raise her eyebrow and say, "You're not perfect at it," right? And she's right, because like the amount that I run, you can't not have some trade-offs and sacrifices. Okay, so there are some trade-offs and there are some sacrifices. It's also the case, though, that the running, they observe the running very carefully because they don't understand. I mean, they do now. They're 17, 15, and 12. They know what my job is. They couldn't understand how hard I worked or that it mattered, right? But they can follow the running, right? And I don't think it's a surprise that 2 of my children are elite athletes who are phenomenally good at their sports, and not only that, intensely dedicated, right? And they've actually, where they picked it up, who knows, but I think they've observed the dedication of the running, and they can understand it more than the dedication to like editing at the New Yorker, right? And so I think that's been a good lesson for them. Then there's this other part of like, I do think running, I have this super intense life where, I'm kind of working a lot and there's a lot of decision, there's a lot of stress, and running is like the way I de-stress myself, and it creates a little mental space. And so to the extent it makes me a more reflective person, which I hope it does, then that probably makes me a better parent. So there's some trade-offs, there's a lot of pluses and there's some minuses. I'm very I write in the book that my goal is to break the string of Thompson fathers who've disappointed their sons. And my hope, I don't get to choose whether I did or not, but in 20 years maybe they'll read that line in the book and I wonder what they'll say. I will say that one of them trains with me now, and on my 50th birthday paced me to a sub 5 minute mile, which was very exciting. And he's about to begin his sophomore year track season, and he's really happy because I get sent all these shoes by the shoe company, so he goes to like his track meets and like the latest prototypes, and he thinks that's cool.
You just basically almost parent them in a way to become the best of themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you think your father helped you become a better editor.
Yes, he definitely did. So my dad, specifically he would edit everything I wrote and he would push me, but what my father, and parenting is so hard because there's like, how much do you push them to do better, right? And my dad pushed me in a couple ways, right? Like, he sort of had this like, he put this expectation on me that like, you're so smart, like, why wouldn't you win every award? Like, of course you should win every award, which creates its own kind of pressure. Like, it's positive, but it creates a certain kind of pressure, particularly when you don't win the awards. But it makes you, it's self-confidence and it can be pressure. Secondly, he put some specific pressure on me where he would say, like, I remember complaining to him once and like, I rewrote that paper 4 times. And he was like, so rewrite it 10 times, right? Which is actually very good advice. But kids can react to this differently. And like, I don't put as much pressure on my children as he put on me. I try to give them all the support and all that, but I don't like, they certainly know that I like it when they get good grades and do well and study hard. But I try to model more or put pressure more on like, these are proper habits, not these are proper outcomes. As for the specific editing, yeah, he definitely taught me a whole bunch about editing. And he also, I don't know if I've quite, like, he was just so open to experience, and he was so like, he just loved life and always wanted something exciting to be happening, and like was never wanted to be bored. And so he was always inviting interesting people over who I got to meet, and like he took me everywhere, right? He was like, I'm 9 years old and I'm meeting with, I don't know, the ambassador to Japan in Japan. Or I'm meeting with the Japanese foreign minister, right? Like, he's like brought this little kid with him because why not? So I learned a ton from him.
The definition of better evolves, and I'm curious how better has evolved from you from where it was when you were in your 30s.
Better, of course, is an extremely hard concept to define, but like in my 20s, I just wasn't, like, I couldn't get hired where I wanted to get hired. I was a street musician. I was a pretty good street musician, but I wasn't that good a street musician. I found this list of like jobs I'd applied to, like hundreds of jobs. I like kept kind of like going up 1 step, falling down 2 steps, just all these incredibly frustrating professional experiences. I just didn't have much self-confidence. I didn't have much confidence. I wasn't really like, I was sort of kind of upset at myself all the time. And in part, this is the expectations of my father. Right? My father is like, well, I remember I went to Africa when I was 22 years old, and I was like, oh, I'm going to write. He's like, you should win a Pulitzer Prize.
Right, otherwise.
Whatever. I got like an essay published in the Brookline Tab. So part of it was the pressure of my father. And I think the everything better is just like, I became an objectively better writer. I became an objectively better editor. I became objectively more self-confident. I think I probably became a better spouse in the sort of the 30 to 50 period where things have it's not like everything goes well, like all kinds of terrible shit happens and I fuck stuff up all the time. But just compared to this period where like nothing went right, it's been much smoother. But the definition of better is a hard one. I would just say like the level of like, my level of self-confidence of am I making the right choices and trying to do the right things and doing them reasonably successfully has gone way up from when I was 27 years old.
That's a perfect segue to how we're going to wrap. So we are in the studio of Peter Tenney. Ethan, who is standing over there, has very graciously invited us into this beautiful...
This space is crazy.
It's
so cool.
gorgeous, and
so
the
cool.
art is gorgeous, and there's 2 more floors downstairs. But one of the things that Peter said when we interviewed him a few months ago was his evolution in life and the quality of his life was deeply intertwined with his ability to let go of the outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Did you leave nothing on the field? Did you do it in the best way that you can? So shout out to Peter, and I feel like that's this like red thread that ties some of our guests together who are like have really interesting second mountains. And in closing, I have to give a shout out to my wife who's here. I have a tattoo on my arm. It's 6/5/51, and I got that. I'm going to start crying. Sorry. She went through cancer. She went through ovarian cancer twice in 3 years. And she was training for the marathon while she was going through chemo. And I said, if you're able to finish this marathon, I'm going to get your finish time tattooed on my arm.
Oh, that's incredible.
I'm the wife, right? And yes, my time is not. I've got this really good excuse, right? You get 6 hours, or I did it the second time, and I managed to get 7 hours, right? But I was going through chemo. But seriously, we were lying in bed the other night, and he's like, "Holy shit!" I'm like, "What is that, honey?" And he's on page 100 of that book, and he's reading the bit about post-traumatic growth. And I grabbed the book. I read it. We both have stuff underlined in the book. Mine is in orange, his is in blue. And I'm so grateful that you labeled that for us and to really think about that idea of post-traumatic growth. I gave the book to my surgeon today. He's a runner as well. And I told him, you've helped me be here to get this sense of like rebirth and joy, right? In going through something really hard. And I just love that you labeled it. And thank you so much for that.
Oh, that's amazing. That is incredible.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
So I think
6:05:51.
here we go.
That's
So
awesome.
I hope that everyone here who has any post-traumatic stress can turn that into post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
We have lots of dumplings and lots of wine in this beautiful space. Nick has to go eat dinner with people that are a lot less interesting than we are. But he does have to go.
I do have to go.
Thank you guys for being here. Please keep hanging out over there. And Nick, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me in
is
this
great.
amazing community and this amazing space.